brothers and sisters, the doctrine that I want to lay before us this morning is this, and then support it through the various texts of Scripture. But our doctrine this morning is this, that God is no respecter of persons. God is no respecter of persons. God does what he pleases, and he does not ask permission of men for anything. And yet that's exactly the way these men treated the ministry. And Jesus is going to use this parable to condemn them, as we have already seen. But he's going to convict them, and he's going to show them that they were usurpers and rogue leaders, just like their fathers were in the days of old. And Jesus is going to show them that the authority that he does possess is the authority of heaven itself. The authority of heaven itself. So let's look at this divine authority, because that's the question. That's the question that they have asked him. By what authority are you doing these things? Who gives you permission to come and to cast out these sellers and buyers? And so let's support that doctrine through these verses found mainly in chapter 21. Now notice, Jesus teaches that God alone is no respecter of persons in the parable of the two sons. It is God's prerogative to command any man, particularly his sons, to do what? Work in his vineyard. That he's teaching that God has the divine prerogative to call his sons to labor in his vineyard. Both sons, not showing favoritism to one over the other, but both sons the father asked to go labor in the vineyard. It was lawful work. It wasn't sinful. The father was not asking them to sin in any way. What he had asked them to do was lawful. It was good. It was honoring to the father. And they both should have gone and labored in the vineyard. Of course, we know only one did. And that was the one that told his father, no, I will not go. But he was convicted afterwards and then ended up going to the vineyard. The other son, the second son, was very much like the scribes and the Pharisees. When the father came to him and said, I want you to go work in the vineyard. Yes, sir, I will be glad to go work in the vineyard, but did not go. And Jesus asked him the question, well, who did the right thing? Who is the one? Which son honored the father? And of course, they said the one who went and worked in the vineyard. Jesus is teaching them that God has the prerogative, and he has the only and sole prerogative of commanding and sending workers out into his vineyard. These workers in these vineyards are like these religious leaders. They were the one that would go to put their hands to this work. They were the ones that would go and lay down, if you will, their lives in the teaching ministry of God to men, what they should believe and how they should live. And it's God's prerogative, beloved. Listen to me. Any of you young men out there are older men. If God calls you to the ministry, you will come. It's his prerogative to do so. He calls men to come and labor in his vineyard. But you got to realize something. The scribes and the Pharisees were not, that didn't really interest them. They weren't interested in the ones that God had chosen to go work in the vineyard. They were only interested in men corrupt like them. They were only interested in those men that were like they were. Self-indulgent, corrupt. Because what did they do? The parable of the landowner, what did they do when God sent his servants to them to correct them and to teach them and to realign them back with the will of the landowner? What did they do to them? Well, the text tells us they killed one, stoned one, and beat the other. So he was not interested in the real servants of the living and true God.